You pick it up without thinking. You use it 3 times a day. It sits in your kitchen drawer right now, and you have never once questioned why it exists. But here's something most people don't know. For most of human history, the fork didn't exist. And when it finally appeared, not in a kitchen, but in a royal palace, the most powerful institution in the Western world declared it a sin, not a luxury, not a curiosity, a sin against God. And for nearly 700 years, they made sure almost nobody used one. Welcome to Object Lore, where the things you use every day turn out to have histories you never expected. You probably assume the fork is ancient, that humans have been stabbing food with prongs for as long as they have been cooking it. After all, the knife dates back hundreds of thousands of years. The spoon appears in almost every ancient civilization. Surely the fork followed close behind. It didn't. The dining fork, the kind designed specifically for bringing food to your mouth, barely existed in the Western world before the year 1000. While knives and spoons fill archaeological records going back millennia, the fork arrived late, very late, and when it did appear, it was not welcomed as a practical tool. It arrived as a statement, an outrage, a provocation. The story begins in the year 1004 in the city of Venice. A Byzantine princess named Theodora had just married into one of Venice's most powerful families. She arrived from Constantinople, one of the most sophisticated courts in the medieval world, and she brought with her the customs of the Eastern Empire. Among her possessions was something that had never been seen at a Venetian dining table before, a small two-pronged golden fork. She used it to eat, quietly, privately, the way the Byzantine court had done for generations. But Venice was not Constantinople, and the clergy were watching. When Theodora died shortly after her arrival, likely from plague, a Benedictine monk and cardinal named Peter Damian did not mourn her. He declared her death punishment from God. In his writings, he described the golden fork as a symbol of decadence, of vanity taken to its most absurd extreme. She had refused to use the hands God gave her, and God, he wrote, had answered accordingly. This was not a private letter kept between monks. Damian's words were copied and carried across the monasteries and cathedral schools of Europe. The story of the vanishing princess and her golden utensil became a formal warning, cited for generations, as proof that the fork was not merely unnecessary, but dangerous. It placed you, symbolically, above nature, above what God had intended. And in the medieval world, that was not ambition. That was heresy. The message spread across the continent. For the next several centuries, the fork existed on the fringes of European life. It appeared occasionally in royal inventories, catalogued between jeweled goblets and silver candlesticks, treated as a novelty. But it was never adopted, never trusted, never placed on a common table. Part of this was theology. The hand was considered sacred. In the medieval world, food was received as a gift from God, touched with gratitude, handled with humility. The idea of placing a metal instrument between yourself and your meal carried connotations that went far deeper than table manners. It suggested distance, artificiality, pride. Think of it this way: in an era where every illness, every failed harvest, every death was read as divine will, the choice to eat with a tool rather than your bare hands wasn't simply unusual. It was a statement about your relationship to the natural order. And the natural order, as far as the church was concerned, did not require cutlery. The most vivid example of the ridicule the fork attracted came in 1611. An English traveler named Thomas Coriate had spent years journeying through Europe and returned from Italy, captivated by the Italian custom of using forks at table. He wrote enthusiastically about it in his published journals, calling it a mark of hygiene and refinement. London was not persuaded. His peers gave him a nickname, furcifer, a Latin word meaning fork-bearer, but also a common slur used for criminals and slaves forced to carry a yoke. Playwrights mocked him. Friends laughed openly. The idea that an Englishman would refuse to touch his own food with his own hands was treated not as sophistication, but as a kind of weakness, a sign that something had gone wrong with the man. 700 years, one golden fork, and an institution powerful enough to make an entire continent eat with its hands. Then something shifted. In 1533, a 14-year-old girl named Catherine de' Medici left Florence to marry the future king of France. She brought with her a dowry of jewels, a retinue of Italian cooks, and forks. But this time, the context was entirely different. Catherine was not a foreign curiosity, arriving in a skeptical merchant city. She was marrying into the most powerful royal court in Europe, and what she placed on the French table didn't arrive as an act of vanity, it arrived as a symbol of civilization itself. The fork, almost overnight, reversed its meaning. Where it had once signaled decadence and godlessness, it now signaled refinement, sophistication, cultural superiority. Aristocrats began acquiring forks, then the wealthy merchant class, then the minor nobility. The fork didn't spread because someone had convinced the church it was acceptable. It spread because the rules of status had quietly rewritten themselves, and suddenly, eating with your hands was the embarrassing option. By the 17th century, Italian craftsmen had evolved the design entirely, adding a third prong, then a fourth, and curving the tines to hold food more securely. That change was driven, in no small part, by pasta. A straight, two-pronged fork was nearly useless against long, slippery noodles. The fork had to change shape to fit the cuisine, and in doing so, it became genuinely practical for the first time. The same object that had been condemned as sinful excess had transformed, within the span of a century, into the defining mark of a civilized table. Today, there are more forks on Earth than there are people. In the United States alone, billions of forks are manufactured every year. The vast majority of them disposable, used once, discarded without thought. The object that was once restricted to royalty, condemned by cardinals, and mocked by English socialites, is now so ordinary that most people never consider it at all. But the path it traveled to get here runs through Byzantine palaces, papal condemnations, and the dining rooms of Renaissance courts. It passed through centuries of resistance, and then centuries of aspiration. It was banned, laughed at, wielded as a symbol of status, and finally, only in the last few hundred years, handed to everyone. The fork didn't become universal because it was obviously useful. The knife was obviously useful, and it arrived millions of years earlier. The fork became universal when the story surrounding it finally changed. So the next time you pick up a fork, at breakfast, at dinner, without a second thought, consider that someone once lost their reputation defending that exact gesture, that a woman died and was denied mourning for it, that a man was called a criminal in the streets of London simply for believing that metal and food could touch. You are not just holding a utensil, you are holding the end result of a conflict that ran for 700 years, through palaces, monasteries, and royal courts, before it arrived, quietly and without ceremony, in your kitchen drawer. If you want to keep discovering the hidden histories behind the things you use every day, subscribe to Object Lore, and share this video with someone who picked up a fork today, which means someone who, not so long ago, would have been considered a sinner. I am Object Lore. The history of the world is hiding in plain sight. Until next time.